This is Steve Mackay from EIT, and I'm just going to do a quick run through TCP-IP Utilities, which are extremely useful in this little presentation, which will take a few minutes, and you have all the materials provided to you as well. Steve Mackay, EIT, Engineering Institute of Technology. So there's a whole heap of little utilities here, which if you don't remember, it's definitely worth bearing in mind that they are around, and it's just a quick refresher here. So I've used a Word file or a PDF file just to run them out rather than do it in a PowerPoint format. So it's a little bit confusing, but at least I can now reproduce all the typical messages you get on your computer. So these are all available. If you're ever troubleshooting an industrial Ethernet link or some other problem, use these as your first port of call. They'll give you some very quick and useful information. Probably the most famous one, of course, is the good old ping, called the Packet Internet Network Groper, which allow you to actually detect whether someone's around or not. So here's a typical example of ping. Ping with your IP address, so 192.100.100.4, and that gives you an idea of whether that guy's out there. A little variation on it is to use ping 192.100.100.4 and then a little hyphen T, and that just allows the ping to continue. So if there's any dropouts, you'll see them very quickly. So let's see if we've got a little right up here. Here's an example of a ping. So it tells you the time to get the response. It gives you the approximate round trip time, so to there and back. It typically sends out 4 packets, but as I say, you can actually use a few more by putting in a hyphen T, and it'll just continue until they hit the Control C button, which will then stop it. So ping gives you a quick feeling for someone out there. Don't fret if you haven't got the IP address. You can also use the web address. So you go ping www.eit.edu.au, and you will get that will also work. So ping is very useful, and there's a few little variations on the theme here. Here's an example of you can't reach the host. There's another one there, timed out. So it means it doesn't exist or there's some problem. ARP is another little utility. You may remember vaguely from your good old days of attending a TCP-IP training course that there's a MAC address, which is a hardware address on the Ethernet card, and then there's associated IP address, a 32-bit IP address or a 128-bit IP address. So this will give you the actual cache, tells you what the hardware addresses are. So ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. So here, for example, ARP displays the ARP table. So ARP-A will tell you what's in your table. So here you can see the IP address and your physical address. NetStat is another one, also useful, very underutilized, and that gives you a bit of a view about the protocol statistics. So NetStat gives you a bit of a quick view of the protocol statistics associated with your machine. So NetStat-E gives you a bit of a view. The other one is IP-config, shows entire TCP/IP configuration. So you go IP. If you ever don't know what switch to use, you just go IP-config, add / question mark. So IP-config /ALL gives you a complete view of what's going on. So here's a view of your particular setup here. So you can see the hardware address, IP address, the adapter, etc. Gives you a good view. WinIP CFG and WinNet CFG is for the Windows 95-98. Same information as IP-config, which you won't use that much these days. Traceroute is another really good one, and it's used in the term Traceroute, T-R-A-C-E-R-T. The formal one was Traceroute, and that gives you a view of how your packets go from you to some remote host very far away. And it actually gives you some good information here. So, for example, here's a Traceroute. IDC Online tells you all the actual delays, how long it takes, and the route it's following. So it's quite actually interesting to see the route. You can actually get a graphical representation of this, but this gives you a very good idea of how your packets are tracking through the different systems. As you can see, typically your time builds up to half a second, about 75 milliseconds. So Traceroute's quite useful. And you could use a nice little graphical based one. Here's a Traceroute used with the graphics and tells you where your packets are traveling. So these are freely available on the web. Route is another one. Tells you the route you want to send a packet. It manipulates the network routing table, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. So those are quite useful little extra additions, and they give you a little bit of extra mileage in working with your industrial network or individual office network. It gives you a bit of a view of what's going on. Very quick utilities, very easy to use, very easy to interpret. Probably the most famous ones are ping and Traceroute, and to this extent ipconfig and ARP, just to give you a view of what's going on. So that's me signing out, Steve Mackay, and thank you very much for tuning in, and really appreciate you listening in to TCP-IP Utilities. Cheers, bye.